All right, we're going to spend the next hour and a half or so horsing around. We're at the Country Dreams Farm on the Pellerin Road. What is this, the town of Beekmantown?
Yep.
Oh man, I got two things right. It can go downhill for all I care from here. Some time ago, and I don't know, was it a month ago, Melissa?
About a month ago up at Jack Dragoon's open house.
We stood up there as we have so many years in the past, and this little tiny lady walked up and said, "Hey," and you started talking. I forgot what you were even talking about.
Well, because I was impressed by your suspender story in the Press Republican.
Take a look.
There you go.
There they are. Holding them up one more time. Just don't ask me to bend over, that's all. So,
I think you said something like that in the column, and some other story you said about having been outside and got quite chilly and stood in front of the wood stove, and they left that lasting impression with me, and so I just thought I had to mention to you that people like me that are reading your column get a big kick out of what we read.
This is Melissa Provost, and as I've learned then and today and talking before the camera started, she loves it when I hurt myself. I mean, she thinks that's so cool. No, I'm just kidding. But I do silly things, and I love to tell the world about them. There are very few pretenses in my life, and when I wrote my little article for next week's column in the newspaper about bicycles, you'll see why. But in any case, we started talking, and we're both pretty good at that. Only
I'm wonderful
I thought
at
I
that.
was better than you were for a while because George was there. George Weidel, whom we'll get to talk to later on, said she's very shy. I don't think she'll ever go on camera. Guess what, folks? She talks way better than I do because she's passionate about something. And that something is old stuff.
Horse-drawn equipment. Old farm antiques.
Look at this place. She told us about this place, and Calvin and I looked at each other, and our eyes became glazed, and we said, the first spring day. And look at this. We're in, I don't even know what we are, May 5th.
Cinco de Mayo.
Is it really Cinco de Mayo today?
Yep.
I remember that because it's the day after our anniversary. Wedding anniversary. So it's May 2003, a beautiful sunshiny day with the sounds of nature. Can you hear them all over the place?
Birds
and
tons
creatures.
of birds.
And when we first walked over here, very close to the fence, I heard.
Yep, the horses.
I'm very familiar with horses, and I don't know what I was in previous lives, but I must have had some connection with horses, and Melissa probably did too.
Oh, I'm sure I did.
We're just connected, aren't we?
Absolutely. Because I wasn't brought up on a farm. Didn't know the first thing about farming.
But you told
Never owned a horse either.
You told me a story a few minutes ago before the camera started, and you have to repeat that about how your parents took you to see.
Arto Monaco from the Land of Make Believe.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, right. Everybody's heard of Arto. And whenever I'm asked, how did all this start? And for a long time I said I really didn't know because I didn't know. And I spoke with my mother about it one day, and she brought down a whole bunch of pictures. And I was at the Land of Make Believe, probably only 2 or 3 years old, feeding llamas and goats at Arto's. And so I blame Arto for some of this, not in a negative sense, but he started it. And then I vividly remember being in kindergarten and going out to Minor Institute when they had the draft horses and had long hair, and the pair of them eating a great portion of the back of my hair before anybody realized it. And
you had really, really long.
I had really long hair, and it was much lighter in color then, and they ate quite a bit of it to the point it had to be trimmed. And
that's so cool.
So I think that those two places were probably quite instrumental with what I do today.
Isn't that amazing? We're going to get to that in a minute, but before Calvin got here, we were just looking around inside and outside the house, and we were talking about some of our favorite places, like Upper Canada Village.
My favorite.
Like Shelburne Museum.
Yes, another one.
Like the Adirondack Museum, which you have never visited.
No,
and
I never have.
Our friend Dr. Richard Frost.
A wonderful man.
Says you what?
He's speechless that I've never been there to see the horse exhibit, and I never have. I assumed it was all just Adirondack stuff. I didn't realize that they did the horse logging exhibits. So that's on my next place to visit.
Horse logging is a big thing there, and I have to tell our viewers, as I have probably 1,000 times before his death at the age of about 88 some years back, the late Alfred Vaughn, who was my wife's father, and his wife Leona went with us to the Adirondack Museum. And he started walking through that exhibit of the old horses because he was an old logger from the Saranac Lake area. And you talk about being in heaven as a kid. He was immediately transformed to the age of 19 or 20 as a young man. He explained, we didn't have to read one thing. He explained every piece of equipment for us, and it was a great day for him and a great day for us. So,
I can imagine the exhibit must bring back a lot of memories for some of the old-time loggers in the area.
Now, we're going to move around a little bit. We just wanted to let people know who you are and why you're interested in this kind of thing. But you have this wonderful thing called Country Dreams Farm. Is this a dream of yours for a long time to start something?
Well, since I drove my parents crazy as a child, all I wanted to do was live on a farm. I told them they should have just sent me away to live on a farm, but they
never mind
really
finishing school, right?
That's right. Didn't necessarily care about school, although I did go to college, agriculture, of course. But I should have lived on a farm. But so now I say this is the adult form of rebellion. I do it because I can now.
I love it.
One horse is not enough. I mean, it's like one potato chip. It's never enough. So now there's close to 20 here on the farm.
So you just little by little?
Little by little, yeah, a few animals at a time. And I've lived here for 9 years and started out with 2 horses and a couple donkeys, and here we are, 50 animals later or so.
And you're learning every day, you tell me. You buy every book you can find.
I love to read old veterinary manuals. I love to read anything that has to do with horse-drawn equipment, whether it's old or new. There's people out there, this is quite a revival. Not just the Amish farm with horses, a lot of people farm with horses. So the information is becoming more readily available. In modern print, people are writing books. Lynn Miller has quite an extensive library in modern horse working, and can I help you identify equipment? And there's a lot of companies that are still making horse-drawn equipment for the Amish, and so that stuff is available to buy.
Some of us who are older, as I am, and some of us who are younger, like Melissa, are fascinated by the way things used to be. Either because, as I said before, we were there in another life, or because it's just fun to look back in time. But you've carried this not to the extreme, but you're really trying to do things with horses and buy old equipment. And
yeah, I probably own, probably 60 or 70 pieces of horse-drawn equipment. Mowing machines, rakes, tedders, hay loaders, all kinds of plows, some threshing machines, planters. You name it, it's possibly here, and what's not here I strive to find somewhere. It rots away on people's stone walls, and if I see it and they're inclined to sell, well, we can usually deal, and I come home with a new treasure.
And she pushes George's creative expertise to the very limits, trying to manufacture parts.
That's right. Some of these parts are no longer available, so it takes somebody with a little bit of mechanical knowledge and blacksmith know-how to fashion the parts for me. And we've taken a Belcher Taylor corn planter that was dated 1863. Planted corn with it last year.
Did you really?
We did, and it works wonderfully. We'll plant corn with it again as soon as we can get on the fields. It's an amazing piece. It's pretty amazing that most of this stuff can be made to work again, and most of the nuts and bolts, little WD-40 takes them right off. And
it's good for everything, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing.
Some things I've used WD-40 may never get in their little brochure, but I've used it for many, many things. Speaking of little brochures, you have a nice one. Did you design that?
Actually, George's daughter, who is a graphic designer, she designed the logo and designed the brochure. I told her what it needed to say to appease me, and away we went with it. Now,
we have to please Melissa.
I make it sound simple, and poor George's daughter probably found working with me much less than simple, because I had some wish lists,
You
and
never guessed looking at her that she could be that way. would you?
well, believe it.
But we mentioned George. We'll get to talk to him. He's gone to work
He's working on a barn.
on a
we're
barn, which we're going to look at.
Yep.
He's a blacksmith par excellence. That's where we first got to see him.
Yep.
And now we're so delighted. I think
you.
maybe our viewers can tell. We're so delighted to be here on this beautiful spring day in May.
It's a gorgeous day.
Would you like to show us around?
Sure.
All right.
Obviously, these are draft horses, draft mules. Right here you've got Pat. He just came here last Sunday. And over there is Pete, another draft horse. And behind him are 2 draft mules. Everybody works. Everybody has a job, whether it's towing a wagon or a sleigh or planting or harrowing. Everybody here pretty much earns their keep. There's a
pull
few,
their own weight,
they
so to
do.
speak, huh?
Literally and figuratively, they're pulling their own weight. There's a few that don't pull their weight for one reason or another, but the big guys have to. It takes a lot to feed them, so.
It's amazing, and Calvin has seen the old footage, the old movie footage of those teams pulling, we talked about the Adirondack loggers, pulling loads of logs that you wouldn't believe any animal short of 6 elephants
absolutely
could pull.
I have seen, I saw an old video, and I actually own the video now, was on a PBS show,
I've seen it.
the old horse logging.
I've seen it.
And it is absolutely amazing. I could watch that all day. I think horse logging is amazing. Haven't done any of it, but I just think that horse logging is absolutely amazing.
How they freeze the roads and then
Yes.
use these great poles to get it first moving, and once they could get it moving.
I've seen some where the load was headed down such a steep incline that they had to have a way to hold it back.
They did.
Yeah.
I hear
You hear
one
a
of my
donkey.
One of my relatives back there.
That there is a stud donkey, and all of his lady friends are in a different pasture, and he'd really like to be in with them, but
That's punishment, cruel and inhumane.
I know, but his day'll come.
Not that we want to film the process or anything,
No,
but
no,
we
no.
heard him down there, and we knew he was trying to
Well,
get
he's talking
him
to all the
out.
ladies on the other side, and he'd like to be in there with them, but
I
he's got to
love
stay segregated for a few more weeks.
I love it.
You never know what May weather will bring, and we like warm warm weather babies, so he has to stay there for a little while longer.
All right, what's next, Melissa?
Oh, we'll take a walk.
Hey, wait a minute. George is here. I thought I just saw you on top of the rafters, my friend.
I was there. I was.
When's the last time you got
Had a day off, or?
No, the last time you got your forge going. That's what I want to know.
Oh.
Last time you fired up the coal.
This past winter, I had to make 4 fireplace screens.
Did you really?
Yep. So hopefully it'll be pretty soon again. I'm going to bring a portable down here so we can do blacksmithing demonstrations for Melissa.
It's so wonderful that these ancient crafts are not lost because they're part of our childhood lore. And you decided to keep that part of it alive. She decided to keep this part of it alive. And now you're kind of a magical team. You're just still doing it.
Yeah, and in the process, I don't know how long I'm going to stay alive working for her. That's a 26-hour day job, but that's okay. I love the horses.
You know, like I said before, and as we've mentioned many times on this program, it's passion. You
Absolutely.
do it, you're thoroughly enjoying life. And if you don't, all of a sudden, you're looking back and say, oh, I wish I had. I wish I did.
I don't think I could tell you that I wish I had or I wish I did, because I'm doing what I'm passionate about right now. Every day is, I think I'm passionate about working with the horses and the old equipment every day.
It's great.
She is definitely passionate about the old equipment because we've dug some old equipment out of some places that...
We already talked about you and how you have to make parts, because you just don't walk. You don't just walk down to Sears Montgomery Ward or the North Country Farm and Family Center and get some of the equipment, let alone the tools.
The tools,
you need
the
to do
equipment,
the job.
it's impossible. So you do what you have to do and you make it.
She told me about the corn planter
Uh-huh.
from 1863.
Yep.
Planting corn with it in 2002.
Yep. And again in 2003.
That's the thing that I love.
Oh, it's fun. It's incredible.
You allow people to actually come here besides Calvin and me. I know this is a special day for us, but
absolutely.
you have tours here sometimes.
And I'll do school tours for the entire month of May, and by about the 1st of June we'll be open and ready for the public. And we strongly encourage hands-on, whether the kids are making a rope or shelling corn or dipping candles or picking stones. It's
Brushing a horse.
you're brushing a horse. It's all hands-on. We want you to be able to not just look at it, but we want you to be able to touch it. And a lot of places they don't want you to touch, and I just firmly believe that the kids have to be able to touch it and see it to know where they've come from.
I'm old, but I'm not so old that I don't remember almost everything about my childhood. And I'm almost forced to regurgitate it week after week in writing my column. Some things are a little painful, but some things I have to visit again. But I recall all the places I visited as a child where sign says, don't touch.
Yeah.
Hands off. You break it, you buy it.
Yeah.
Right.
And taking my kids to the Smithsonian, which is a wonder. It's our nation's museum. But walking up to things like old engines and old boats that I just want to put my hands on.
Yep.
And there's somebody right there saying, don't touch that.
Right.
Don't even a statue. You love to run your hands across the curves on the statue just to see what the sculptor had in mind. And you're not allowed to do that. So I'm with you 100%.
Oh,
Anytime
absolutely.
people want to do things hands-on, let the kids touch it and feel it and pull the lever and
Well, I
yeah,
don't know if you
kids
saw
love to
the
pull levers and turn
remnants of
cranks.
those two old tractors over there.
of course I did.
They're 1920 something cases. Well, they're going to be put back together and painted and made kind of nice looking again. The first thing little boys do when they get here is climb on the tractors. So we're going to put that
What else
together.
is there to do except
Right.
climb on a
We're
tractor?
going to put it together and let them climb right up and do whatever they want. The only thing here is don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Touch anything you want, but don't get hurt.
You know, we've been, that's something Calvin and I have enjoyed doing because there are several people here in the North Country who restore, collect old-time tractors
Yes.
and farm equipment and restore them. Some of them are lined up, some of them are in barns, and we visited quite a few of those. You can spend a lot of money just putting one tractor back together.
You
in
certainly
case
can.
You didn't know it.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, I've got a few of those, and it's a part here and a part there, and a couple new tires here, and maybe not much more till next year.
You know, but every now and again we'll see an article in the paper about horses. Didn't we see there was some event this weekend? Oh, it was the pet walk.
And the Kentucky Derby
And the
days.
Kentucky Derby days, that's a whole different thing. And the Kentucky Derby itself, where if I'd only known to bet on that number 6 horse.
There
I
you
know
go. I didn't bet on any
That
of
was
them
a real
either.
long shot, huh?
Oh, man. We might not even be here today. I might be taking you guys out to lunch.
In the Bahamas.
Anywhere. All right. How did you, first of all, let me ask you how big this property is.
95 acres.
Perfect. Or do you want another 95?
Well, it would be better if I had more.
Never
She's working at
satisfied.
it. She's working at it. She's a determined lady. She's going to do it someday.
Are there neighbors that are bending a little bit? Is that what you're trying to do, negotiate?
No, I've not even attempted to negotiate with my neighbors on selling me more. The farmer across the road owns the property next to mine, and then I'm kind of boxed in going on the other direction. But my property is narrow and deep, and I'd just like to have more room to put stuff out. I just don't have enough room, but. You know, you have to work with what you have.
What you need is to plant. You haven't got a sugar bush back there.
No.
You could have an old.
No, actually, it's
Wait,
mostly
that'd be-
wetlands. But once you get
I can
past the
see
back
it's a little
40,
wet right now back there.
it's a little wet right now. But once you're beyond the back 40, I think I'm pretty much governed by some wetland rules, and so.
Everybody's governed by some
I
wetland
know. Yeah.
rules in the back 40 and the front 40 and the, every other 40.
You're governed on them, but you're not allowed to decrease the tax base.
Oh no, you can't do
No,
that.
no.
Don't be
You
silly.
can't use it, but you still got to pay tax on it.
Right.
All right, lead us somewhere, will you?
Well,
And talk as we go, if you like.
Here's obviously a horse-drawn wagon, and of course almost my pride and joy, I'd say, is my John Deere number 4 mowing machine.
Oh my gosh, I didn't see it hiding behind there.
Well,
I don't know if Calvin's ever ridden on one of those before.
Oh, it's an experience, I'll tell you. We mowed hay with the team of mules last year and this mowing machine. There is a funny story behind the mowing machine. I'd wanted it when I saw it, it was a long time ago. And the guy wasn't prepared to sell it at that point. And I said, well, if you ever decide to sell it, by all means, let me know. And he said he would. And he'd come in one day, all smiles. He says, boy, do I have a deal for you. And I said, what's that? And he says, well, you have to buy that stud donkey I have, and I'll throw in the mowing machine.
I love stories like that.
And I said, I don't really want the stud donkey. Because
that was just screaming.
Yeah, the one that was making all that noise.
Okay.
And I told him I really didn't want the donkey, but I did want the mowing machine. Well, obviously, he didn't budge, and I wanted the mowing machine bad enough that I bought the donkey, and because I really wanted the mowing machine, but the donkey's here, he'll be here forever. But it's a wonderful mowing machine. I do have a favoritism towards anything John Deere.
So does Calvin. I tell you, we have talked more about he bought an old John Deere tractor for his father. Was that for a birthday, Calvin? Or for just because?
No.
He found his father.
And old. That was his old John Deere tractor.
Oh, it was his
his
John
first
Deere?
tractor. Yeah.
From what year?
It's the first John Deere Bees that they made in 1948.
Wow.
Is that
And,
cool?
That's cool.
And
Yep.
we're doing a story with Bob Venn and I were doing a story with Tony Trombley up in Ingraham.
He has an awesome display. I love to drive by there and check out his display. I've never met the man, I don't believe, but I love to drive by and look at all of his John
We'll take you
Deere
up there
stuff.
sometime and get a picture of you drooling over the John Deere.
But anyway, and I looked at that tractor and I said, John Deere Bee looks like any other John Deere Bee, but that one looks awfully familiar. So we stopped in another time after we did a show up with Gary Finney on the old John Deere days. And we stopped and looked at it and we got the history on it, and sure enough, it was the one that my father had owned and traded in with Jack Dragoon. And of course, even though it's a John Deere, it did go through Jack Dragoon's hands.
Of course. And it ended up on your dad's lawn.
Yep.
Can you imagine
That
the
is- that's-
expression?
No, he must have been speechless. I know I would be, and that's just absolutely amazing.
I love this mowing machine, and they make a special noise, George, don't they?
They certainly do. It's
Notice no power takeoff here. You see how it works?
It's not quite as romantic as it looks when you're sitting on that seat.
Oh, notice the thick,
There's
the thick pneumatic tires on it.
absolutely. There's a lot of shaking.
Go over a
lot
big
of
rock
banging.
with that baby, and you
You
did
know it.
something.
You know it
And then when the cutter bar hits something that, and you break a tooth.
Well, that was another item that we had to repair because he had hit a tree with the cutter bar pulling it behind the tractor.
Bend it just a little bit.
No, he broke the big yoke on the bottom there, so I had to repair that. Melissa's still not. It works fine, but it's not 100% authentic, so she's still looking for another replacement
Bring
one.
some of these old tool guys back from the dead to make your repairs.
I say so. When I go into Giroux's, I'm sure I always give them a chuckle because I go in and I actually ask for these with as straight a face as I can muster. I ask for parts for these kinds of things, and everybody just shakes their head. And I think now when they see me walking in the door,
They buy-
yeah, I think everybody just runs and says, "You get her this
You
time."
know, back in the 50s when I started rebuilding old cars to make modern hot rods out of them, I would travel all over the North Country for big junkyards, and to
Love
find, and once in a while you'd find some old out of business car dealer who had a barn, and up in the barn were all these brand new old brake pads.
Yep.
And shifting levers and transmission
And you think you
parts.
died and went to heaven when you found them.
You don't find stuff like that much anymore.
No.
So if you want it, you got to make it for a piece
gotta
of
make
equipment like this. But isn't that neat? What a beautiful piece of equipment it is.
Well, I didn't know I was ever going to get into collecting mowing machines, but the other day I was at an auction in Vermont and I bought a John Deere number 1. So now I have to have a number 2 and 3 because this is a 4. So
You got to have
Yeah.
the series.
yeah, you just got to keep up.
Right.
Yeah, the
I don't know if
complete
that's an authentic oil can, though. I was really worried
series.
about
Well,
that.
probably not, but it works.
Possibly. It seems to fit real well.
It fits right in there.
And the handle's even made so it locks onto that little holder.
What? How could you ever? Well, this is one's got a pump on it with a
Right.
handle. And the old oil cans, you remember when you pushed on the bottom and they went.
Yep.
And it reminds me doesn't it remind me of an old Bill Cosby, where Bill Cosby's going down the hill? Is it in San Francisco with a go-kart that they made out of orange crates, and the guy's on the back pumping oil into the
I
wheels?
never saw that one.
And he did all the sound. Never mind. You just make my mind go crazy here.
Well, that's all right.
All right, I love your mowing machine.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so neat. All right, next.
I don't know where to. I
my.
don't even know where you'd begin with all this.
Just show us stuff.
Here's
here.
the sleigh.
Well,
Look at
this is a sleigh I bought in Vermont, and it still has the original stenciling on it. It says U.S. LS service,
Let me get a
but
little closer
no
here.
one seems to be able to tell me any more information about it than that. But we've had it out. It was out last winter. We did some rides with it. It's a nice old piece.
Wow, that's, you could restore it. You wonder how
Well,
much to restore
Yeah,
because of the original.
George will tell you that I balk about restoration.
I know. But
Like-
you have to make it workable. You still
Well,
have
it
to-
works, so I'm happy with it. If I don't ever touch it, as long as I live, then I'm not going to feel bad.
The runners are sturdy. You look at the sturdy part, you look at the support posts, and they look pretty solid. Yeah, I love it. What? Any idea how far back it dates?
Not really.
Not a clue.
No, we've heard all kinds of.
What would you guess?
Well, I would say early 1900s, huh?
I would.
Early 1900s to late.
I would guess 1880s. And I
And-
know nothing, but I love old equipment, and I would have to guess that it dates back about 20 years before.
Well, the only information I've ever gotten about it, even when I bought it, was that it was a government sleigh used to haul, and the choices are out there. One guy told me he believed it was to haul ice, but we don't know. We don't know.
Pretty small for ice, but that's
Yeah,
possible.
absolutely. I mean, we just there's no consensus yet on what it is.
A lot of young people watching this saying haul ice. My mother used to tell me to haul ice, but I don't think she pronounced it quite that way. I just wrote a couple of columns about the creek, about Scamotion Creek and,
Yeah, I read
the
those.
crickers. And I received so much email about the ice house down there and the ice business in the wintertime and how they went out. I have a couple of ice saws hanging up in my little river room where I contemplate sometimes. And they would preserve the ice during the hot summer months in sawdust.
Yep.
In a quiet place, and the kids, after running and playing and sweating, would sneak into the ice house to cool down. Is that great?
My father had built one a few years ago, kind of like a bank, and you'd go in, there would be sawdust on the ice. It was very cool because it was basically underground except for where the door would go in, and so I can imagine you could preserve it. And he put sawdust on his too.
Being a resort area, the restaurants used a lot of ice around here, and private citizens did. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking about how old I am, but when I was a kid, we had an ice box. And we had the guy who came and delivered the ice, and I've got a couple of pairs of the ice tongs that I saved down through the years. And you put it in the top, and it was my job to empty the tray in the bottom because it does tend to melt.
Yep.
And I never remembered, and so I was always mopping rather than emptying. Well, that's the way life is. Some people are emptiers, and some people are moppers.
Well, Melissa does have an ice box up there that's going to go into the new show barn, the
Really?
new gift shop, but we're going to try to put some ice in there and keep a few drinks for the kids and show them how they used to keep stuff cold.
Wouldn't you like to go in that store I told you about in Billings,
I would
Montana?
love to go
And
in
get a
that
case
store.
or a six-pack of the old Coke bottles. And
Oh, I would be in heaven. I would be.
but I don't know, did I tell you about that? Were you here? Billings, Montana, last week. They unboarded an old building and found out that it was a store that had been boarded up. This is like a dream for me. Boarded up since 1953. I said to my wife, where's Geraldo when we need him?
Yeah.
They went inside and they found everything imaginable, from old coffee, things in bulk, posters on the walls. Some of the coffee, I can't remember the name of the coffee in the 1950s, not a famous name, but just the poster itself is worth about $5,000.
Wow.
Can you imagine? People were scrounging. I was going from one picture to the next on the website like a kid in a candy store.
I would be a kid in a candy store for sure.
And so I guess they. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess they sold everything out of that place, and they'll probably tear the building down, and there will 50 years of history. What's this thing for?
It's a shoeing stock. You put a horse in there to trim their feet.
You were going to walk by without explaining that.
Yeah, because you see, it's not really old. It's
It
new.
doesn't matter. It's for horses.
It's for horses. Yes, you walk them in.
How does it work?
Well, you put 2 straps over their back and 2 straps under their belly, and of course they walk in straight, and you put the one around their butt. And I wouldn't tell you that it immobilizes them by any stretch, but it kind of contains them so that you can pick their feet up. And of course, each one of the blocks would hold a foot into position, and you strap it down. It's not really. We can't hold their feet up for long periods of time to do their feet, and they get bored doing it, so they set it down. But this way here, it keeps them with their feet up.
Is this designed after an old design, or is this something you guys dreamed up?
Oh, no. Everybody that has draft horses has
a stock similar to
has
this?
a stock similar to that. Yeah. Well, I don't say everybody, but most people have a stock similar to that if they've got draft horses. Just makes their life easier. I never had one, even with all my other horses, until I had draft horses. Just makes it easier on your back to put the feet up and have them rest their own foot on the block rather than do you have to hold the foot up.
I see some clippings.
Yep.
On
Those
the
are
ground.
clippings off smaller horses, smaller equines.
Just so people would know that these are dead snakes or anything.
No.
Walking through here.
No, and of course here's a bunch of baby goats running around.
Oh, golly.
They're destroying a brand new bale of hay, but that's all right.
They tend to do that, don't they?
They do.
You got a lot of tack and stuff in here.
Oh
a lot of
my
collars
gosh.
and-
Collars, harness.
You're going to love it. You say you've never been up to Arto's recently?
Well, it was what, 2 years? When did I go up there, Artis? 2-3 years ago.
He's got some old tack that he bought back. And you
Oh,
walk
really?
into the barn and he's got it hanging up just like it would have been many years ago.
No, I don't think I've seen that. No.
Oh, great sign up there. Tractors?
Yep, the John Deere A series.
I see you've got the sign Manure Happens. You couldn't help but have something like that in your barn.
Well, when I do farm tours for the area children, they're appalled by the manure. And it's a fact of life, and all the kids tiptoe around it, and it smells, and it's, and well, I guess that's what you deal with on a farm.
Calvin said, wear your heavy boots today. You might be stepping in some. I said, that's the story of my life. I've stepped in lots of it.
Actually, we try to keep the vast majority of it picked up, but when the little goats come out, they can get in and out of the door here, and so they run all over, and
I love the smells on the farm. I don't know about you, but my memories are attached to the olfactory senses. And when I smell something like a White Owl cigar, I think of my Uncle Harold. When I smell...
I just opened up a bale of hay the other day, and this green stuff here is all second cut, and I'm just breathing it in, and it reminds me of being in the co-op, but just of being outside, like fresh cut lawn kind of stuff. I love the smell of hay.
I love it. So in here you got all kinds of stuff, from bridles to reins to all kinds of tack, collars. You have a lot of old horse collars? Or are these mostly pretty new ones?
Well, most of what hangs on this wall here is brand new collars, and then sporadically throughout the barn, you'll find hanging up here in the mow and down here on the walls is all old stuff that I've picked up here and there over the years at auctions.
You know, I wouldn't have the slightest idea how to harness a horse anymore, although I've harnessed lots of horses in my day. You just get out of practice. And some of the names of things, like that kids might be watching this show wouldn't know what a whipple tree was, for example. Or would they, huh, George?
There's a whipple tree hanging right there on the Manure Happens sign.
That doesn't look like it's 200 years old
No,
either.
that one's not 200 years old. We would use one, but when you're doing it for the general public, you have to make sure everything's as safe as it can be. So we use mostly new equipment when we're doing anything for the public. Now, if we're out in the back field and we're plowing and we're trying to do a real authentic demonstration, we can use the old leather harness that we have over here with the wooden hames, and it just looks more authentic. It's fun. I enjoy it. There's tons of antiques up top there. I don't know if Calvin saw all the fanning mills.
Explain what some of that stuff is. When you say
Well,
fanning
Melissa
mills,
knows them better.
Well, most of them have, and some are not complete, of course, but they have different screens. And as you turn the crank, different grains would be separated by different screens, and they're going to come out. There's a little chute at the bottom, and the grain comes out and leaves you the stuff that you don't want, the chaff, the straw, the stems, that kind of stuff is put by the wayside. And but most, I think I have one that's fairly complete. The rest of them are just the actual machines themselves. The screens are no longer
Probably
with
two
them.
pretty complete.
Two of them.
This one here was made where?
The red one is a Queen of Harvest, and that was manufactured in West Shazy.
Come on.
No, I'm not kidding.
Still has a stenciling right on
The
it.
stenciling is on it, and it says it's the Queen of Harvest, manufactured in West Shazy, New York. It's a really neat piece. I bought that from Dick Frenier in Schuyler Falls. He had a big auction a few years ago, and fortunately I was there. And believe it or not, at that point I had very little horse-drawn equipment or any of this old farming stuff. But I saw that particular piece and fell in love with it. And actually it was in the house for a long, long time. And then we did some remodeling and I put it out here. But that's a special piece because it was locally made. And it is dated. It was the early 1900s, wasn't it? It was a date on that.
I don't remember exactly.
It's early 1900s. There's a date on it up there anyhow. And that was in the early 1900s.
So you got a couple of horses in here today?
Yep, there's a draft horse here, and that's her daughter, 2-year-old daughter.
Oh my.
Renee? Renee?
She's busy taking a bite to eat.
Hey, look over here. Come here, baby.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Isn't she beautiful?
Pretty girl, huh?
You know, you watch them lining up for the Kentucky Derby. You don't realize how tall some of those horses are until you see a guy who's 6 feet tall going.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
These guys are a story all themselves. Melissa bought them not this past February before that.
And they had not really been touched a whole lot by humans, not a whole lot of human interaction. And it took us about a month to make friends so that we'd be able to get them loaded. And as it was, they came home pretty much one at a time in a 4-horse trailer because they'd never ever been loaded in a trailer and never had their feet trimmed or anything of that nature.
Kidding.
But they've come a long way. Most all of them have now been harnessed, and they don't. These guys, the last few that all came from the same place where they haven't had a whole lot of hands-on, haven't done any actual work yet. They just kind of loaf here for right now.
That will change if I know you. That'll
Absolutely, that will change, and that's the 2-year-old. Of course, I adore her. Had a saddle on her the other day. Her name is Marie.
Marie, you did have a saddle on.
Yes, I had a saddle on and kind of rode her around here on the inside of the barn because it was raining out and I couldn't do much outside. So against George's better judgment, he was busy and I just kind of, I told him I was only going to put the blanket on her back, but I think he knows me better than that.
Melissa wants to live on the edge.
He knew I was going to do more, and once the blanket was on and she didn't balk, I thought, well, I'll set the saddle on. I assured him I would just set that. I assured him I would just set the saddle on and we'd see what happened. But before I was done, I was riding.
Oh, of course you were. And you will be in the future too.
Yep. Oh yeah.
What a beautiful Marie.
I want her to be able to work and ride, and I think we're on our way there.
Oh, that's great.
She's been harnessed several times, and she's easy to work around.
Have you ever watched the videos or read the books about the horse whisperer?
Yep, I read the book.
I should have known.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Isn't that a neat? You know, you're bringing back just floods of memories for me, and I hope for a lot of our older viewers out there, of watching horses work. And as a little kid, I loved to watch horses work anywhere. And I did watch the interaction between the person who was working the horses and the horses. And there are some guys who would beat them and whip them and kick them and curse them, and the horses would stop. Mm-hmm. Or move slowly, and then there was the guys who would talk to him.
Very softly.
Just a little bit, talk to him softly. And I used to love the horse pulling contests at the local fairs. I would never miss one. I've got a piece that I wrote about him when I was about 8 years old, and as I look back on it now, I think it's kind of insightful that an 8-year-old kid would notice the interaction between the...
Absolutely.
But it was the point is, the guy that whispered is the guy that won.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I've learned the hard way at times that the horse whisperer is very profound. You don't want to yell at the horses. You have to trust them as much as they trust you, and if you break that trust, you're going nowhere. The softer you talk to them, the nicer you are to them, within reason. You can't let them get away with misbehavior, but Melissa will tell you, I'm a city boy from New Jersey 20 years ago, and I couldn't spell horse.
You'd never know it, boy.
Not quite.
You're fitting the mold up here, buddy. We never would have guessed that, George.
But the horses have taught me so much. It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, like you say, the interaction, it's just beyond description unless you do it or come and watch
you
it.
mentioned the word profound, and it is. The relationship between people and animals, you know. Little old ladies with their dogs after their husbands die. I mean,
right.
These therapy pets that they bring into nursing homes. And you tell me that this isn't therapy for you.
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely. I mean, there's days I've gone to the house crying because a goat has died or a horse has died.
Oh, we got a pig out there now.
Yeah, that's my Rosie, a pot-bellied pig. Yeah, she hears us down here. She's wondering what's going on, I'm sure. But I would say that the joys far outweigh the sorrow. Obviously, nobody likes death, but it's always very profound when you lose a creature that you've come to love, and they die. I don't deal with that well, but it happens.
But then there's the other end of the spectrum when they're born.
Well, when people say to me, what's the best? And I say the birth of babies. And what's the worst? Of course, death. But the birth of babies is great. This time of year is just awesome to have all these little babies running around. And
Sorry to create all that commotion, Gordy,
I didn't
but
mind at all.
they heard the door squeak.
You ready? Look at that.
there,
How
it was a
gentle.
good girl.
Gentle. Nice lips. Isn't that beautiful?
They know the sound of that door squeaking through the trees.
Boy, did you see him go crazy? Look at that, how gentle they are.
It is pretty amazing because they could take your hand off and
Oh, of
they just
course
work
they
with the
could.
lips.
She knew I trusted her, so
Yep.
she was there. Never forget the old trips we used to take up. What was that, Park Safari?
Oh my
Over in
gosh.
Canada, where the creatures would put their heads in the car and you would go to feed them an animal, and you had slime and
Slobber and
slobber,
oh yes.
Then you had to drive, and then what was that? The place where the monkeys jumped on the cars?
Yes.
Ripped the antennas and every square inch of exposed rubber off the vehicle.
I guess they don't do that. You can't get near the monkeys anymore.
No, you don't do that anymore. They learned. I imagine they had an occasional lawsuit. I'm not sure, but.
If you really enjoy old equipment, Melissa can walk you around the back and show you a little bit more equipment.
Well, you know,
I'm going to have to live to be 100.
we're here for the duration, and if we have to do 7 chapters on this wonderful dream farm, we'll do that too.
There's only a couple pieces out here, so this won't take long.
I don't know. I've heard that line before too.
You don't believe me, I can see that.
I love this. Look at this. Look at the scroll work.
That we use as a training vehicle. We can put them on single or change and put the pole on and put 2 on. And so if they're new at this, it slows them down considerably. You don't want to be on anything with wheels. It just rolls for
when you put a ton of concrete blocks in the back of it.
Yeah, I know. I talked about the horse drawing contest and the fairs, so I know
yeah,
what
well,
it's like.
we have to weigh them down substantially before we start out because it is probably quite scary to them. And we've gone on some fairly harrowing rides.
No, have you really?
Oh, yeah. And so now George is a bit, he's not as scared as I am. So we make sure that they're well loaded. And then, after they've proven themselves and we realize we're not going to take a terrible ride, we let off the weight, and eventually they're on an implement that just rolls. But yeah, we've had some harrowing
That
rides.
kind of business is not without its risk. I was telling Melissa before you joined us and before Calvin got here about the controlled chaos that used to open Adventure Town every day with that wonderful stagecoach, which Calvin has seen in person. And this guy was a very, very good driver, and they had absolutely beautiful horses. But these horses were going full out every day, and the kids are outside the gate screaming and hollering, and we're firing blanks. And the
Right.
horses are really, any number of things could have happened at any given time. But what did I know? I was 20 years old,
Right.
and I had it where I needed to have it back
Right.
in those days. So you don't pay attention. It's only humorous in retrospect, I guess.
Well, yeah, we've had some near close calls, and they are humorous. In retrospect, we can kind of chuckle about them. At the moment that they're happening, and you've got a horse that seems immediately out of control, and you're doing what seems like 80, and you're probably only doing 30 or 40 miles an hour on a horse. That's substantial when you're dealing with this kind of terrain.
Oh, I know all about it.
You know, and they take down some fences and they bring you over a stone wall. You know, George has been laid up at times. He went over a stone wall with a set of disc harrows.
The disc harrows? Oh,
and
come on.
That's a real harrowing experience.
That's a
Harrowing experience.
stone wall with
Well,
the
Melissa thought
harrows.
I was being silly because she was up here fixing the fences they took down, and I was down in the back pasture with the disc harrow, and she said, "Why is he laying down on those disc harrows?"
I thought he was laying down.
Well, I wasn't actually. I was laying down, but I was tangled up underneath the disc harrows, trying to get the horses
You had
back.
all your body parts when you finished?
Yeah, everything was still there.
But he was lame for quite some
Well, I
time.
wasn't lame that day. It was
No.
the next day.
Oh, it's always the next
The
day.
next day.
The second day, it's always,
Yeah.
oh, man.
Yeah.
You asked, you know, John Bruno was standing next to you.
Yes,
when
our
we were
good
up
friend
there.
John.
And
Uh-huh.
John has told me a few times when his ponies got away.
Yeah, we've
One
heard
time
some
right
of those.
down the road.
Yes, and he was covered with road rash, and you know, like
He really took a ride.
This was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
yeah,
when
just
that
a couple years
I've heard
ago.
all the stories from John.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we did kind of chuckle after the fact, you know, like once you realize that you are intact and you're going to make it, you know, you can kind of look back and think, wow, that's kind of funny. And, you know, like even now with the disc harrows, seeing the commotion at the time was quite horrifying. Now it is kind of humorous, but when you're living it at the moment, it is not even remotely funny.
No, not funny.
And now with a set of disc harrows, I mean, it's a rather dangerous piece of
I
machinery.
would say they don't make Band-Aids big enough if you
No.
got tangled up in the wrong spot.
No, they don't. And I wasn't. He jokes and says the first thing I said was, "You didn't destroy my cast iron seat, did you?" But I did not ask that. I
Say,
asked
no, my cast iron seat, baby. Never mind.
I did. You know, I asked him if he was all right and what he was doing, and he did say at some
That
point.
wasn't the first question, right? Or was
No.
it?
"Yeah,
There's an unspoken law or rule when you deal with equines that if something happens to somebody, before you laugh, you're supposed to say, "Are you all right?" Melissa still does not have that down pat.
I know, and you know, I tell him that I don't think I'm ever gonna have it down pat because the natural, you know, like when he was all right and had I seen blood, I would have intuitively just passed out. It would have been no question. So he was covered in mud and his glasses were covered in mud and he was mud from head to toe. And I said, "What happened?" And he told me what happened, and then he said, "Oh, and your seat is fine, by the way, because I collect
I love
cast
it.
iron and tin seats." And I did not want to put that old seat on this set of disc harrows because I was afraid something would happen to the seat. And he assured me everything would be fine with the seat. And so he was fine and the seat
What's
was
that
fine.
old story about the honey wagon? Maybe we better not tell it today.
You dump that every day.
We dump that every
I don't know
day.
if I ever saw one that small before.
Now here's the famous disc harrows that George took quite a tumble on.
For the uninitiated, they are discs, and they do harrow, and they're made to cut. Oh, I see a few dents. Was that you?
And there is no seat belt, so you know you're kind of
no seat belt.
No, you're kind of at the mercy of the horses to.
See what it says on the seat, Calvin? Superior.
It says superior, and those
Some
are not.
people have said that about mine. Watch where you walk.
Yeah, there's some horse doing here. So of course, instead of George being on the seat,
This pink is a nice touch, I
Isn't
think,
that
George.
I like that.
Yeah.
he was
Melissa
supposed
doesn't,
to be
though.
sitting here, and instead he was sitting down in here, like partially
bad
under. So he's very fortunate that nothing more happened
Oh boy.
than did. But Everybody came out of it unscathed for the most part, although he was annoyed enough at the team to make them work for a few more hours.
Just look around here again, because a lot of this equipment is old hat to you now.
Yep.
But for many of our viewers, especially those who've never been on a farm, modern or ancient, they've never seen this equipment and don't have a clue. So just look around, tell us what you're talking about, and tell us what the equipment is.
Well, this here is 2 John Deere side delivery rakes. The next one over is an International side delivery rake. There's 5 hay loaders over there. One we've restored and is in working condition, and we actually brought in hay last year with a team of mules, loose on a hay wagon. That's quite an experience. And then the other...
Let's get closer to it. I'd like to see it.
Okay, let's get over here and watch your step, Mr. Calvin.
Well, there's no real fresh manure. So.
Yeah, none of this is fresh. It's all
No.
old.
Okay, easy for you to say.
Just been too wet.
It's all fresh to me. Yeah, it's still a little mushy in here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is neat. So many things that bring back memories. Oh, look at this. Another piece of equipment that comes from a long time ago, except that somebody updated some of the main parts, because you have to.
Right. This is exactly the way I bought it. Actually, most of this stuff right now is exactly the way I've purchased it. We've used this with the tractor.
Well, we will have a pole back on it so we can use it with the teams.
Tell people what you would do with it.
It's a land roller. After you've planted a field, you'd go over it and roll it so that you pack the seeds into the soil. Give it a nice pretty look when you're all done.
And the interesting part of it is, a giant version of this used to be used instead of snow plows with deep snow in the old days. They would roll the snow.
Right.
By the end of the winter, the road surface would be about
3 feet higher
this
than
high, and you wonder why it was mud in the springtime.
Right.
They just pack it down and roll it down and pack it down.
Right.
The sleighs could travel easier and the horses had easier going. So
it's not a common piece of equipment. You know, a field roller is not a common piece of equipment.
No, especially a wooden one like this.
Yep.
And then, of course, the plows and the cultivators are all lined up. Just odd pieces I've picked up over the years. Most of the cultivators are intact. Some of them have just been modernized by people taking probably the original wooden handles off and putting on whatever they had around. But these are just cultivators and plows along this back fence row right here.
A couple of dump rakes.
There's a couple of dump rakes.
I have ridden on a few dump rakes in my lifetime.
Yep, the dump rakes. And this, of course, here is the hay loader that we brought in loose hay with. It's an International, of course. And
pretty amazing piece of equipment. It works really well. It's amazing.
Explain a little bit the principle, how it works. Now, mind you, loose hay was the way people did business.
Right, there were no
for years. For years, it was done by hand.
Some of the Amish do it, a lot of them still do it.
But this loads loose hay.
This loads loose
right
hay.
from the windrow.
Right from the windrow. You would typically mow your hay with the horses, make a windrow. This piece of equipment would be hooked behind a flatbed wagon that was being pulled by a team of horses. This reel in the back rotates in this direction and brings the hay up into a bunch right in front of the reel, and these arms oscillate like this. I don't know, I think it's out of here. And these forks would bring the hay all the way up the chute, and then it would dump onto the back of the wagon where you would have 1, 2, or 3 men placing the hay on the wagon.
One good man.
Well,
sometimes 2 or 3.
I've
fallen off of hay loads before too, by the way.
We had a late cut right here in the middle of the hayfield last year that we couldn't get. It was really deep, and this thing brought up so much hay that 2 or 3 men couldn't.
Isn't that amazing?
It would bury 2 or 3 men.
Oh, God.
You couldn't move it fast enough.
My job was always to mow it away. I don't know why. I mean, that was, talk about cruel and inhuman
I think the low man on the totem pole got that job.
I was always low man on the totem pole. Gordy can do it. 197 degrees under
Yeah,
the tin
so
roof.
The haymow is probably the worst place to be in the
Marty, you
summertime.
aspire to a position in life now that when we do lose hay this year, you can be forking it onto the wagon. How's that?
Maybe not. You can fork it onto the wagon. He said, smiling.
Do you have the big hay hooks in the barn, or how do you?
We have the hay hooks. They're not set up yet. We are going to use the trolleys and hay hooks for demonstrations. We really want to show the kids and people how hard it was to be a farmer. Typically, a farm barn 110, 20 years ago was only 30 feet by 40 feet because your average farm wasn't any more than 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 acres. And you didn't need more because it was such hard work. It's nothing today to plow and cultivate and harrow a field, 30, 40 acre field in one day with the modern tractors. But if you can imagine a farmer with one horse, possibly two if he was a rich farmer, plowing all day long with a one horse walk behind plow and then going out 2 days later after he plowed it to harrow it, it was a lot of work, a lot of work. And most kids today have no idea what it was like.
That's why farm families are always big families.
They were big families. The farmer needed the help. It was a ton of work. I can't imagine how farmers survived back then.
There was a lot of communal assistance. If one person bought a piece of equipment,
Right. They would share it.
You would share it.
Mm-hmm.
Combining was always a highlight of my childhood because I was always a big, strong kid, and I could always carry my weight and carry a 100-pound sack of grain on my back. And
I think
I'd
unfortunately
make
that's half the problem today. We've kind of lost that sense of community.
Yeah.
People don't want to do anything for anybody unless they're going to get paid or they can see an end to it or what they're going to get in return. Back then, you did it and you didn't ask, well, what are you going to do for me? You just knew that the same farmer would be there when you needed help. And whether you needed help or not, you still went and helped him. But
it's interesting because people who are regular viewers of this program called Our Little Corner have seen both ends of the spectrum now because we have visited modern farms, truly modern farms. Back in the days we're talking about, you only had about 20 head. The farm I worked at as a young teenager, there were 35 head of Holstein. It was a good size,
that was a big farm.
and when milking machines first came out, it was still a chore to milk and strip the cows night and morning, and it's a long day. Now, you mention equipment. I can't tell you how much money some of these farmers have tied up in equipment.
Right.
And they're still having a hard time making ends meet. Because the more cows you got, the more it costs to operate. And with the price of milk, here we go again. With the price of milk at a horrible place right now, you're lucky you don't have any cows here because you'd have one more
cows.
thing to whine and moan about. Because I don't know how farmers do survive.
I don't know how they do it either. I mean, I feel for them because they're getting paid about what we're paying to buy it in the store. I mean,
Exactly.
or less. And
Think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to stand up and say, oh, yes, I'm willing to pay more for my gallon of milk to feed my family in the grocery store, but they have to realize that small farms are what feeds the world, really. I mean, and if these guys aren't making enough money to sustain themselves and their families, eventually everybody is going to be at the mercy of a mega farm who will control the prices.
Yeah, we don't have anything against big farmers, but we love the small farmers, and we love agriculture in general because this is where we came from.
Absolutely, and I have nothing wrong with a mega farm either. I just think that there needs to be a level playing field even for the small farmer like Ed Pellerin who lives across the road. I think that he deserves to get paid an honest wage for an honest day's work, and believe me, I see him out harrowing 10 o'clock at night by the lights on his tractor, and I think that these guys are putting in a long day, and the only
still
thing
can't pay the grain bill, right?
Right, absolutely,
Yeah.
and he's only farming to milk his cows and to sell a little hay on the side possibly, and how the average milking man does it, I don't know.
Talk about learning. You've talked about learning lessons from the animals. When you're relying on old man weather or mother nature, and relying on all the foibles and quirks of atmospheric conditions and animals and terrible springs and wet summers, and you learn a lot of lessons, and that's why everybody viewing this program would do very well to take their kids and sit down and talk to an old farmer for a while. If you want to learn what perseverance and stick-to-itiveness is, those are the lessons you learn from the old farmers. So you're not satisfied with one.
No.
You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5 or 6 hay loaders.
5.
And there's still 1 or 2 out in the woods that we have to go pick up and dig out.
Yep.
Well, this one here, for instance, I forget where it was, but there was a tree, about 6 inches, 5, 6 inches. It was growing up right through the center of it.
You got to be kidding!
And a bunch of little trees.
Didn't
Nope.
wreck anything?
Nope. Fortunately,
That
didn't
says
wreck
a lot
anything.
for how strong it was.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
It's, you know what's really amazing? You take a new car today and you go to try to take a nut or a bolt off and usually snap it because it rusts right on there. There isn't a nut or a bolt on this machine that you can't take off with 2 crescent wrenches right now.
Isn't that amazing?
Every one of these nuts and bolts we took apart and reused them. We put some new washers because some of them were missing washers, but every one of these nuts and bolts has been apart and put right back together. It's amazing.
That's really nice when you can preserve as much as the original stuff.
I mean, the adjustments all still work.
Look at this. Isn't that incredible?
It's amazing. It's amazing how well this machine works.
I think we prove another thing every time we look at old equipment. We prove just how ingenious our forefathers were to be able to create things with the technology they had. That's pretty special even by today's standards.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've become a throwaway society, and these were made for longevity, and obviously they are. They're still here in working condition. We had to do a little, just some maintenance on it, greasing, oiling it, and fortunately a guy up in his barn had a whole bunch of the wooden pieces brand new. They'd never actually been installed on a piece before, and he gave them to me. And we put them on this.
Isn't that neat?
And I didn't even own a McCormick hay loader at the time. From that man, I bought an Oliver hay loader, and he said to me, I'll tell you what, I'll throw in these arms and you can do whatever you want with them. You can put them on this machine if you want. Well, that's sacrilege. You can't put red on green.
Listen to this.
Oh, you're learning, Melissa. You're going to learn, Melissa, very shortly.
So I said, no, we're just going to save those because eventually I'll own a McCormick hay loader and I'll put them on a McCormick. And so eventually I found this one, and it had all the arms were rotted away. So I took, it's a painstaking process, but you take every one of the pieces off and you put them in a big box and save them, and then
you just start in and do it. That's all. That's how a job like that goes.
And so, they found a great use. They were just sitting up in his barn, and
it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, absolutely.
There's somebody up there saying, okay, here's what we're going to do with Melissa and George today.
We're going to find that machine she's looking for.
Pulling your strings. All right, what have I missed here? I see you got another mower over there.
Oh, yeah,
There's probably
quite a few mowers.
5 or 6 more mowers over here.
I have a Walter A. Woods mower. It was manufactured in Hoosick Falls, New York.
Oh yeah.
Bought that one at a auction. No seat on it at all. It was minus the seat.
Yeah.
And one day, by pure chance, we were driving through Keysville. Actually, we were on the outskirts of Keysville, headed towards J area. There was a little antique shop, and it wasn't open. But we stopped anyways, and there was a man outside doing some yard work, and asked him if we could look around. He said no, his wife wasn't there. And George happened to just peek around the corner of the door, and there was a Walter A. Woods cast iron seat.
Oh, baby.
And so
you haven't lived till you had a Walter A. Woods cast iron seat,
there you go. So he said, well, he couldn't make any decisions on it because his wife wasn't there, and we would have to wait for the wife. And I had to have the seat. I just had to have it. And so we just waited around and visited with him for a few minutes, and lo and behold, the wife pulls in. And the tag said tractor seat, and of course I knew it wasn't. And so I asked her about it. She goes, well, I must tell you that it's not a tractor seat. And I said, I know that. And there it goes. It was the seat.
It's hanging in the shop.
Yeah, it's hanging in the shop because it was in rough condition to begin with. It was all pitted, and until I fixed that one up, I didn't want to put it out here to be.
I want to see how you're going to straighten this wheel out, George.
I don't think that's going to happen. some of these things that we've picked up for parts over the course of time, and this was a parts machine. And
nothing goes to waste with Melissa.
No. This was. It drives me crazy to see the scrap metal dealers head down the road with everything already cut into a 4-foot section, because I don't know whose stone walls they're cleaning, but I'd be inclined to pay them more than the scrap guy is going to be paying them for the very same thing.
You know, you say until I fix it up. Now, does I mean George?
Well, I is kind of, yeah, the job goes to George. I got the money, he has the brains, and so there we go.
Pieces like this, it would take you 2 weeks to make this piece.
Yeah.
But we have it here, so that's a Van Brunt grain drill over there.
And it was flopped over an embankment in
Thrown over an
Saranac.
embankment, it was going to get buried.
And my brother is on road crew for the town of Saranac, and he called one day and he said, hey, would you be interested in an old grain drill we found thrown over an embankment before we bury it? And well, of course I was.
There's
So
parts of that are in pretty good shape.
absolutely.
So parts that were on it.
Yeah.
We went up and dug it out of the embankment, and here it is. Basically, that particular piece may not be able to ever be used again, but the parts and pieces, because I do have 2 more John Deere Van Brunt grain drills, we'll have parts and pieces for it.
I want to know how you load them up and get them home.
With, you
Never-
can't even imagine.
Melissa has a trailer with a winch on it.
Well, actually, you see, George has a trailer, and I bought a winch, and so we did. It's can be a day project if there's trees to cut out or anything. It's just.
I just want people to know that you don't say $50 and then 2 hours later it shows up here all by itself.
No.
There's
No.
a process involved.
Absolutely, there's always a process. Typically, this stuff has been sitting on somebody's stone wall or in somebody's field for years, decades, and so it does take some work to get it out of wherever it is, and here, and then it's going to sit here for a little while until we do something with it. But the last place it'll ever end up is headed to Japan to be a car and come back here. It's
You'll never be out of things to do. It's reminiscent of back in the 50s when Frank Papps taught me how to dive a little bit, and I would watch other people come down from Canada. And this isn't a blanket indictment against Canadians by any stretch of the imagination, but they would jump in the lake and bring up beautiful iron artifacts to put in a museum, no, to load on their pickup trucks and take back to Canada for scrap metal.
no,
I would stand by the road and the tears would come down my face.
It bothers me terribly when I see a truckload of this stuff headed for scrap metal, because to me it's worth way more than the price of scrap metal, and I know there's pieces here that I have paid people way more than they would have ever gotten for the price of scrap metal, and I think twofold, it's not going to be turned into a car, but secondly, it's here to see, for everybody to see, basically.
If she wanted to sell scrap metal, here's a prime piece, a lot of weight, but this is a portion of a drag saw,
That's what that
a
is.
reciprocating drag
That
saw.
makes perfect sense to me now that you're telling me this.
So
I
we
never
do
would've
have,
guessed.
we have the carriage, it's over here, we have pieces up in front, we have the blade, we have the rack. I have to restore all the wood on it. The wood, it's sat for a long time and rotted. But we're going to assemble this, put it up, and we're going to make a horse sweep.
Oh,
we
what a
can-
great demonstration that'll
demonstrations
make.
with a horse sweep.
Yes.
And showing kids how they possibly sawed firewood
Yeah.
100 years ago with a drag saw. The whole community could get together and saw all their wood up.
And of course, this was made in Morrisville, Vermont, at the Morrisville Foundry.
Oh, was it really?
Yep.
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 There are only a certain number of good foundries around, and you had to know where they were. There were some down in Troy. I did some research that made all the church bells in the world way back when.
Yeah.
Really.
Yep.
These are 2 more Van Brunt grain drills right here.
Yep.
We will make 1 or possibly 2 out of those. Get them going again.
You got the old tire chains hanging on here.
They had old tire chains to cover the seeds. They had pieces of plastic for the seed fertilizer drop tubes. But farmers did what they had to do. If that was the only grain drill he had to plant this field, whatever they had to do, they did it and used it.
Ingenuity. That's why you're perfect at this place, because you got it in your head. You can see what needs to be done and dream up a way to do it. And that's what farmers had to do.
Right.
I mean, you know, they could not take time off to go to town
No.
and buy a bolt or buy a knife for for their mower or whatever. They had to make do with what they had to take
You
things
had
apart.
to.
And
You
work
had
on.
to make your living, to eke out a living. You had to fix what you had when you had to fix it. There's the remnants of 2 McCormick corn binders,
Oh yeah.
both horse-drawn. I don't know if Melissa can find one. Maybe I'll get lucky, but if not, we have 2 there and 1 way down in the back, and I'm going to have to make 1 out of the 3.
All
because
identical? Are they pretty close?
Yeah, they're
Right.
all McCormick's. So
They're all McCormick's.
we're hoping that I'd like to find one intact that can go right to binding corn this fall. But if I don't find one between now and then, well, we'll have to do something to make one work.
They look a little
Magic
bit,
wand. You're
Maybe-
fresh out of
wand.
magic
Maybe
wand.
the magic wand.
but that's something else that's really interesting to watch. Is a team of horses walking down a cornfield binding corn,
Oh, my,
watching
my,
the corn be cut and bound together in groups of 5 or 6 stalks, and then just dropped right over.
That's one of the things that kids need to be educated about.
Right.
I was talking to a wonderful woman, a transplant from Scotland this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and I was mesmerized by her accent.
Mhm.
I went to Scotland, Kay and I did last year, to trace some of my roots, and we had an awful lot of fun, but the accent is just beautiful. And she was talking about how, she was born and brought up in the Highlands, and her mother and grandmother made a conscious or unconscious decision not to teach the kids that beautiful Gaelic language that has such beautiful music when it's spoken. She's got a wonderful Scottish accent, but can't speak more than 1 or 2 words of Gaelic, and what a tragedy.
That is
And if we let our kids grow up and not having any clue
right.
Right.
how farmers used to do things,
Mm-hmm.
that's like saying to the city kid, where does milk come from? He says the Grand Union,
Yep.
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 That's just like looking at these pieces of equipment. If somebody doesn't save them, like Melissa, I mean, there are pieces in museums, but at some point in time, there will be no more pieces around. So we're trying to save as many as we can, get them restored, refurbished, just cleaned up and working again.
Talk about lessons of life, and I don't mean to wax philosophical, but sometimes I must. Because in looking around here, I can see that for both of you, the job is never done.
No,
And it never will be done if you live to be 200 years apiece.
never will be done.
And people a lot brighter than I have written in prose and verse the fact that it's the passion is in the quest.
Absolutely.
It's in the search.
Yeah.
It's in getting there,
Yeah.
fixing this stuff up.
Well, see, George will tell you that I lose sight of that real quick, though, because I'm incredibly impatient and I want it all and I want it yesterday. And it frustrates me, like when I go into Giroux and I want to buy a part for an old John Deere machine that's obsolete, and they say, doesn't come up on the machine anymore. And I'm like, oh, it has to come up on the machine. What do you mean it doesn't come up anymore? And the parts are few and far between. You really have to look. You've got to make a lot of phone calls. But yeah, I'm incredibly impatient when it comes to saving this stuff.
My second book will be called The Real Melissa.
The real Melissa. Well,
The woman behind the smile.
Yeah. The reward is working on this equipment and getting a few bloody knuckles and then going out and using it and seeing it work. And seeing it plant the field as well as a brand new $250,000 machine could. Not as fast,
Yeah,
but
not
just as well.
fast. We won't do it near
It's-
as fast as the big farmers do. But then again, there's not the overhead either. There's not you don't take out a payment book when you bring this home. Now you're going to have people that are going to argue, well, in essence you do because you have to feed those horses all year. But yeah, but they're a joy to be around. You don't pet your tractor. You pet your horse.
Oh, I've known people who've
Well, I suppose
had pet names for their tractor.
I guess I've probably tapped my tractor.
She has a John Deere H that she pets it. I've seen her pet it.
Well, it's a 2-cylinder, and I love the sound of that tractor running. So every once in a while, we'll take the tractor out, and I'll say, just start it, and you can just let it sit there and run.
Calvin knows what they sound like, don't you? Huh?
Yeah.
Aren't they
She
beautiful?
grabbed hold of that flywheel on the H and spun it, and it started. You want to see her? She got about 6 feet high, jumping up and down. She was so proud of herself that day.
It's like cranking up an old biplane, you get it going and it fires and oh man.
Oh, I love that, absolutely.
Well, sights and sounds, and the only dimension we're missing here today is the smells, and we haven't figured out a way to connect them with Calvin's wonderful modern camera over there, but you're going to have to take my word for it.
Well, if
They're all here
if
today.
they really need the smell, all they have to do is stop by and shovel a little manure, and they'll
That
smell
or
it.
drop Melissa a line and she'll send them a little box.
Very small, I hope.
yeah, very very small box.
Note right on the outside, it ain't anthrax either.
No.
Right, right.
What haven't we seen?
Um,
Is there anything out here that we haven't seen, or anything
you know,
else
there's-
chapter that we haven't talked about before we go in and look at all that neat stuff inside your house?
Oh no, you're going in my house.
Yes, we're going in your house.
Oh gosh, not really. I mean, what you see is what's here.
What you
Whole-
see
whole
is
bunch,
what you
whole
get.
bunch of donkeys and
You,
pygmy
how many
goats.
llamas do you have?
10
10 llamas.
and about 10 miniature donkeys.
I saw my first llama at the Bronx Zoo.
And I hope it was a pleasant
And
interaction.
it was a wonderful interaction because I rode on it as a very small child.
There
and I
you
can
go.
remember the
Okay.
experience even today.
All
The
right.
Bronx Zoo and the Central Park.
Well, the
Zoo.
first thing everybody says is, "Oh, they spit." Not really. The
My
introduction.
grandfather used to spit too. What's wrong with that?
Now, I tell people that the reason why they think llamas spit is that their first interaction is usually in some kind of petting zoo.
Look at
Isn't that cute? And
Little boy.
yeah, typical little boys running around there, annoying everybody.
They do.
And if they're in a confined area where they're tormented by people or teased, they will spit. That's their natural defense. Llamas typically don't spit on people, though. It's usually at one another, and it's no different than kids fighting for a pecking order in the family or something of that nature, and they do it to keep everybody else in line. And
Just look at this. Oh. It's beautiful, the way they interact with each other.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Most
have
times.
incredible personalities, and they live for a very long time. So I tell people when they think they want a donkey for a pet, yeah, you should be in it for the long haul, because these guys here will probably, like this little guy right here, good health and good feed, he could live 30, 40, 50 years or more.
Yeah, 50 years is not all that uncommon. I've
No.
seen horses that were almost that old.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Donkeys are notorious for their longevity, and so it's not something like your dog where you're going to have it for a few years and then it's going to pass
You
on.
only have the one pig?
Only one pig, yes, and she does enough destruction for the yard that's all they'll ever be
Have you
here.
had her for a long time?
Yes.
Never made a house pig out of her?
No. She was very destructive in the house.
I
Chewed
know
things,
people
destroyed
who
furniture.
do.
Oh, I tried, and she was just incredibly destructive. And I said, well,
No.
that's not the natural habitat for a pig, anyways. And she's very happy out here. She destroys. Well, you'll see that used to be a perfectly level field, and she roots and digs for grubs or whatever it is she's looking for. And so no, she has to stay outside. Can't come in.
I could never quite understand how the potbelly pig caught on. I can see maybe a ferret, right?
Yeah, I have had a ferret before. They make better pets than a pig does. Yeah.
I thought there was a parrot there. There was a ferret or two at the pet walk over this
I saw
past
a
weekend.
cute little white one. Yes, I saw it on the TV.
Well, this is just a delicious
Of course,
day.
there's
Could we
horses
ever?
back here.
Could we ever have picked a better day to do this?
I don't think so.
It's about 75 degrees.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's
On
absolutely
the 5th
gorgeous
day of
today.
May 2003 with Melissa and George at this wonderful farm that's just a time capsule. And we're all kind of fascinated by the idea of being able to distort time, to go back in time in a time
Right.
machine. And I once wrote a children's book called Melissa and Marilyn. It should have been Melissa. It was Marilyn in the Magic Closet, where she went in a time machine. But this is a real time machine that's a living, working farm today, and that's the best part of it right here.
Yep. This here is the big mouth you heard when you first got here and started
Yes,
filming.
we did. We did. Who picked all those stones back there? I want to know. I mean, kids today don't know what picking stones is all about.
Well,
I tried that.
my children can attest to the fact that they did an awful lot of crying over picking stones out of that newly plowed field back there. They had never had to work that hard, and all their hands hurt and their back hurt, and it was hot, and they went on and on and on about how cruel and unusual that was to have to pick stones. And at some point during the whole process, Ed Pellerin came over and was saying that even with a broken leg and a cast on, he would come home from school at night and pick a load of stones for his father before milking, or sometimes a load in the morning, maybe both. And, you know, the kids were just dismayed by the fact that they would ever be.
There's a lot of stony ground around here,
Absolutely.
you know. And if your kids wonder how those stone walls got there, I mean, I once wrote a column about stone walls because they're, you know, literally and figuratively, we've all faced stone walls in our time.
And of course, I am a stone wall fanatic. I love stone walls, and so I cut out. You had 2 articles basically about stone walls. I do believe
it. Couldn't stop when I got on
You
a roll.
couldn't, and I've saved both of those articles because I absolutely love stone walls.
But I like to think of the process when I look at that wall that stretches as far as the eye can see and then disappear in the woods. How long did it take? Was it 3 generations? Was it 20 years?
Oh, well, like these stone walls here, as we pick stones out of those plowed fields, they get dumped right back on the stone wall. So for how many hundreds of years does it go on, possibly? It's hard to say. I don't know.
We have people building them today.
Yes.
That's why a friend of mine on the way to Peru on 22B was building.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful stone wall. They've done a wonderful job.
I couldn't understand why I would mention him in the paper, because that's beautiful.
Every time I go by that place, I think, oh my goodness, that guy has got a lot of devotion to that stone wall, because it's absolutely beautiful. He's done a wonderful job with it.
I mentioned Scotland, and they don't have wooden buildings in Scotland. They have stone buildings.
Right.
And even the buildings that are 200 years old with no roof on them anymore, you look down off a cliff and you see an old stone barn sticking up there, and you just transport yourself back and wonder what it was like when it was part of a working farm, you know?
As I see some of these huge stones, of course now we have a tractor to move them onto the stone wall, you wonder how they did it 100 years ago when they were farming here. You know, I mean, obviously it was with a group of people and probably a team of horses that drug that stone out of the middle of the field and put it up on that stone wall, but I just think that to destroy a stone wall is destroying history. I mean,
I can't stand it when I hear that people are stealing stones off an ancient stone wall.
It drives me crazy.
It drives me crazy too, absolutely.
I will go out, I can amuse myself for hours, not when there's snakes, because I don't like snakes. but when it's late fall or early spring and I can be walking on the stone wall, I love to bring up unusual stones and put them in the house, or something that has a fossil of a snail in it or something. And I have found on these stone walls, just by walking, old horseshoes that were just discarded by the farmer, just tossed up on the stone wall. And absolutely, they all come in the house. I mean, those rusted old stone walls go right in the house. And last year, George was digging here to put this culvert in because it was so wet and mucky right there. And go figure, he's there with the bucket of the tractor moving these big mounds of dirt, and I saw something flash, and it was a 1922 silver dollar that he turned.
You have got to.
I am not kidding, and
we came up all this way just to hear this story.
I brought that silver.
Gotta be kidding me.
I brought that silver dollar in the house, and you know, every time I think about the silver dollar that we dug out right here, I think of the poor, presumably guy, who. That was a lot of money. I mean, that was a big deal.
Who could have been a week's wages for?
Who realized that he'd lost his dollar out here, and we found it just by pure chance, by turning up this soil right here to put that culvert in for a place for the water to drain.
How many treasures do you think are under the ground?
Under
the sea and.
Well, I live for that kind of stuff, to find that. My kids came up the other day because their job was to pick some flat stone for the new barn we're building so that we can put the stone on the cement blocks that's there. And they came up with a handle and the metal part of a pitman arm for an old mowing machine. And I was just in heaven. I mean, I said, oh my gosh, that is just amazing that you found that on the stone wall. So I think that there's constantly a treasure trove of stuff to be found on a stone wall, and you know,
One civilization builds on the last civilization.
There you go. There you
Wonder
go.
about technology in the 1800s, and then we have people still trying to figure out exactly how did they build those pyramids anyway. You know?
Yeah.
How did they get that stone there? George, I got to ask you a question, man.
Certainly, sir.
What's the story behind the hat? I mean, it's obviously been through a few wars. I don't know if a llama bit the top of it there, but that's just...
I can't actually tell you how the hole got there. This hat, if I told you, you probably wouldn't believe me, but came out of a dump in New Jersey. My mother was
If I've believed everything both of you have told me so far today, I
My
will
mother
certainly
was a-
believe the thing about the hat.
wonderful dump picker, garbage picker. She would love to rummage through the dump and see what she can find, and
Yep.
she found this hat, and I've been wearing it ever since. So this hat is probably 25, 30 years old now,
Or more.
or more. Well, it was older than that one. Well, I've had it 25 or 30
Well,
years.
So think about that.
So
Goodness knows where that...
I'm afraid
You
what's
know.
going to happen when I lose this hat, because half the kids we do pony rides for or wagon rides won't know me anymore.
That holds all that stuff you got in your head.
Yeah.
And imagine it keeps it intact at least for the time you have
Besides,
the
that hole works good when it gets really warm because it makes a nice
air
vent and
conditioning. I
lets the
love
heat
it.
out.
Can we go inside and see some of your stuff?
Yes, you can come inside. I'm a little embarrassed about you.
You shouldn't be embarrassed because it's just wonderful stuff. Let's show you what it's
I
like
think it's wonderful, but
on the inside. When I came here today before the cameras started, I asked you what piece of old-time construction was going on here, and you said, I think we'll have a little shop or
yeah, well, combination gift shop, antique display area. I have so many antiques that are just stacked and piled in the barns that I need a place to display them. I don't think that it's fair just to have them for my own use, that everybody ought to be able to see the neat stuff. So the upstairs and the wings will be used for display, and the main section downstairs will probably be a gift shop of sorts for neat, original stuff, locally produced things. The area people want to put here on consignment, and so far I've had no shortage of people asking me if they can put their stuff here, and I think that's awesome. That when we're doing a farm tour for out of the area, people want to go home with something that was from the North Country, whether it be honey or jelly or some piece of folk art or something, anything. And so that's basically what that building will be.
Let's just talk a little bit about the construction.
Oh, well, if you know Melissa, you know she's pretty fussy. So basically the center portion is as traditional post and beam as we can make it and still stay within the realm of being practical. It's all mortise and tenon joints with wooden pegs holding it together. The roof rafters.
Are you making your own pegs?
Well, we're cheating there and we're buying maple dowels.
Maple dowels work
Maple
good.
dowels work real well.
They're
If you
still
point the
hardwood.
end, it's still a hardwood and they work just as well as
Of
hickory
course.
or oak.
Takes a while to shave all those pegs, you know.
Takes a while, and if I know Melissa, she'd want me to go make a shaving horse so she can make them, you know, the right way, the correct way. So we're kind of cheating there a little bit. We're just buying 1-inch dowels, but the rafters are all going to be 4x6s, and
It'll be a solid building, no question about
it'll
it.
definitely be
absolutely.
solid. It's fun.
You're
We
gonna-
want the people to get the impression that they are walking into an old barn, an old
Yeah.
structure. Even though we still have to meet modern building codes today, we're going to try to hide as much of that as we can and give them the feeling that they're walking into an older building.
I forgot, you got a bunch of old equipment over there. Did you tell us what some of that stuff is before we
Oh,
started?
there's another mowing machine there
You
and
can go
some
show 'em your
cultivators.
John
And,
Deere number 1 mowing machine.
well, yeah, you can look at my John Deere number 1.
Okay, let's go look at your John Deere number 1. And this is the John Deere number 1.
This
it
is-
says right on it, John Deere number 1.
It is. It's my John Deere number 1 mowing machine. I just love John Deere, and found this at an auction in Vermont and had to have it. And here it sits.
Going to need some parts.
It's going to need some parts. Yep, nothing that's catastrophic, but we'll get it running.
There are, you know, once again, it's sometimes you have to get lucky to find these things, right?
Oh, well, I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there watching this right now who say, well, I have some of those in my barn. Well, but I didn't know about them, so, you know, when I find them at an auction, I'm rather excited. I think that they're neat to have, and We'll use this one. This one will go to work. It needs a new pitman arm, but
Yep.
George is no stranger to making pitman arms. He's had to make a few before, so he'll make one for this. But the parts are all there. He just has to make the wooden part. And it should go to work probably this summer. And then the rest of these things are just cultivators and plows that I've picked up since last year and just haven't gotten moved down back with them yet.
Rome wasn't built in a day, Melissa.
No, well, I know that. I know that. George keeps reminding me of that I have to relax because it doesn't happen overnight. But it would be
You
nice.
just want them to act like a staff of thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can't afford to have a staff of thousands, but I wish I could because we'd have all this stuff sandblasted, painted, greased, oiled, and up and working.
Well, it's all pretty terrific just the way it is, in case you didn't know that.
Well, I kind of think it is. When I see rust like this, I'm right there checking it out. It doesn't have to be painted up fancy and new looking for me. I would prefer to buy a piece in this condition and then do the work later.
Let's go inside. We were headed there a minute ago, but we're going to do it this time. When I first got here, I was commenting on the beams. Actually, Melissa told me about them before we came in the front door. There was a ceiling here when you moved in.
There was. But obviously it came down so that we could expose the beams and the rafters because I was out of room. I had used up every available space for my stuff, and I collect cast iron and agate. Pretty much any old kitchen utensils, and I was out of room. So this was the easiest way to make room. And the house was being put into it was a 1890s home anyways, so we just...
Oh, it's already well over 100 years.
Right, it was built in 1890, so it was just a continuation of, and of course, time, money, the whole works. I can only afford to do about a room a year, and so we've put in a new kitchen, a new bathroom, an office, and then dining room, and of course the living room is still original, and so there's some unfinished work yet to do, but we weren't even done.
Remember what I said about unfinished work?
It goes on and on forever, and so this is a work in progress, and periodically I'll come home with a new piece and step up on the kitchen table and hammer in a new nail and put a piece up. And of course they're not even nails. They are nails, but they were the original nails that were in the lath that was here. And as I cleaned my lath, of course we gutted the walls because there was no insulation. It was insulated with plaster lath and brick. So I saved all the old nails, and that now is what hangs everything, is the old nails that were originally in the house to begin with.
And for the uninitiated, once again, before the advent of sheetrock or plasterboard, houses were walled by using plaster and lath. Lath are narrow boards, about some almost, an inch and a half in width. And then you had a guy who was a plasterer. I have never been able to figure out how they could do that.
It's amazing work.
Great talent. There's some people still very good at that.
It kills me to have to, as I tear this all out of every room, I can't even imagine how much time it took to do all of that work. But obviously it has no insulating value whatsoever, and the house was cold. And so we've
put bricks in the walls, and I found many old-time newspapers. I have lots of collections of old-time newspapers that came out of people's walls when the houses came.
See, I have found absolutely nothing of any interest behind my walls. So as I've done this, in the event that someone guts this out when I'm gone, I left $1, a quarter, a nickel, a dime, and a penny in a baggie in the wall for the year. For like every room has one in the wall for the year that I was redoing that particular room.
Cool?
So for the year of 2000, that room will have every coin or dollar in the wall in the baggie is of that
Who would
year.
ever dream to do something like that except Melissa Provost?
Well,
You're
because
amazing.
I just was hoping that I'd find something in the walls, and there's not been anything of any interest. So now, in another 100 years from now, someone else is doing the same thing I did because of advance in technology, or they just don't like it, well, they'll find the dollar too.
There are so many wonderful things here, and everything has a meaning and a history, and we certainly don't have time to explain everything. But I would like to have the youngsters who are watching and their parents and grandparents just look around and try to say, I wonder what that was for. I wonder what that was
I still say I wonder what that was for. There's things here that some of us haven't even been able to figure out what they're for. And off the top of my head, I don't have a piece right here that we're still wondering about. But there are some really neat pieces in here. It reminds me of going into my grandmother's house when I was a child. And actually this piece here, which is a disaster right now, but this was in my grandmother's house.
This would be called a sideboard or a
Yeah, probably.
and somebody stripped it.
When I got it, it was had about 4 coats of paint on it, and it was in fairly rough shape. So we took off the rest of the paint, but that was probably 15, 20 years ago when that happened, and so now it just kind of gets cluttered up with junk, unfortunately. But
Any place there's a surface to put something.
well, that's what happens is as stuff comes in and I don't have a place for it right away, it just all kind of gets.
I wonder if our viewers would know, just by reading what it says, what that would be for. Calvin would know, and Melissa, of course, would know. And people are saying, I know. This is like Jeopardy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know what that is. Look at the leveling device. It tells you to take the balance at the red point and use the adjustable screw.
I love those. As you can see, I have a dark green, a mint green, a red.
Oh, you cheated. You got an egg on one of them over there.
An orange.
Oh, look at an orange one over in the
a different color, a different kind of orange one over there. And then I have a different brand manufacturer in the front, and that's silver. Yes, I love chicken and egg poultry collectibles. I have a shop that is full of old poultry collectibles that I bought at an auction. You know, the old feeders and the ones that stand up and down where the grain would come out into a little trough.
Very well.
I have all, and so a lot of this stuff will go on display in the new barn where people can actually see it. I mean, because I love kitchen collectibles and poultry collectibles tend to rule the roost right here.
It's rule the
Rule
No,
the
she
roost.
picked those words very well. You're a very bright person. You got some wonderful things hanging here, and you just wondered, don't you wonder what the personal history of every item
I do.
is?
I do.
How would a pan like this get beat up like that? Maybe
You wonder.
maybe some
you
tiny
wonder.
babies were washed in it. I mean, maybe it.
Whenever I see a piece that's really, really taken a hammering, you do wonder how that all happened. And there's some I have that you know instinctively that the woman did a lot of shaking the
sure.
spoon off on the side because they're all chipped along the side of the top of the bowl. But I hang them irregardless. There's some here that are not in great shape, but somebody used them in their kitchen
Well,
long before I
that
came
just-
around.
That just
and-
gives them character.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great stuff. Just wonderful, wonderful things. Tinware was very popular during much of the 1800s and
Right.
even before. And I like the old tin candle holders myself.
Oh, yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
you?
Oh, there's not much as far as agate or tinware that I wouldn't collect or put up. I just think it's all pretty neat. Most of the stuff, hopefully in an inconspicuous spot, but not always, still has the price I paid
Oh,
on it.
really?
And you know,
Most people would take that off.
most people would take that off. That's right. But in another 20 or 30 years from now, it'll be something to chuckle about.
This is a lady that puts money in the walls. So other generations will find it. That's a real optimist. Put money in the walls, and
Well, you
100
know,
years from now.
That's right. You never know. And 100 years from now, if someone's doing the same thing I did, they'll find it. Because I found nothing of interest in my walls. I was hoping for maybe a poster or something, but
Calvin's going to follow us in the kitchen because
Okay.
I want to look at some really neat stuff that you were kind enough to show me ahead of time. First of all, this wonderful stove that looks like it was made in 1879 wasn't really,
no.
but it
no,
sure does look neat. It's
it's,
a modern stove.
It's a modern stove with 4 gas burners, 2 electric burners. The oven is electric. It's self-cleaning. It's all brand new.
You want to combine the digital age with
Yeah. Yep.
the rest of it.
Well, I would have done it if I would have liked an original stove in here, but boy, it gets pretty warm in the dead of summer when you want to cook dinner.
That's why
so
they had summer kitchens that
Yeah.
were detached from the house.
there you go. See, and I wasn't at liberty to do that, so we just had to kind of meld both worlds together as best as we could.
I love this corner. Just take a look at that corner. And some
See,
of the-
everything was built around something. I found the door in an old building at my father's place in Redford.
Did you
and,
really?
And I said, what will we do with the door? There's got to be something we can do with the door. And this is George's inspiration. He's so darn smart, He says, well, I'll build you a cupboard in the wall for your spice stuff, and we'll make the door fit the cupboard. And so that was his masterpiece right there.
Wouldn't you love just to have some of that stuff out of that store I told you about?
I
in
would
Billings,
love to have
Montana?
the stuff out of
I'd
the
love
store.
to see the old boxes because they all bring back memories,
Oh, for sure. Most of this stuff I'm not old enough to remember, but, I...
A lot of it, unfortunately, I am. And you have to realize that we were so poor when we were kids that most of what we owned was already hand-me-downs
Right.
and used things. The clothes we wore were from a generation before, or several years before. And so I'm very familiar with a lot of this stuff. And my mother liked cooking with old things, too. So the old coffee pots and graters and colanders. And,
Yep.
and all that stuff, ladles, and oh my goodness, I just love to look around and imagine. But yes, I've turned one of those a few times.
You have? People kid around, but some of this stuff comes off periodically and is actually used.
Really?
Yep. There's times that I'll need a particular thing and not have one of modern day, and so we take it down off the ceiling, use it, gets washed and dried and hung back up on the ceiling. But
I love to talk to the old people and read books about how our forefathers, for example, how they preserved meat, and how they had a root cellar, and how they kept their butter cold, and how we have modern refrigerators, but back in the olden days, even if you had an ice box, you didn't have access to ice in the country, so you had to have ways, and so you had you had a cellar,
yep.
and then you had a root cellar. And
This old house has a cellar, and actually it's a pretty neat cellar. The floors are very. I don't have a problem walking around in my cellar, but someone as tall as George certainly does. They duck all the time. But the foundation is all big stone. It's the old-fashioned cellar, and that's the place to go when it's really hot in the summertime. Guaranteed, it's usually 20 degrees cooler in my cellar than it is upstairs.
Constant 50-some degrees.
Yep,
That's
yep.
beautiful.
It's great in the cellar, and it's perfect for storing things like your potatoes. But my cellar is for a multitude of things. More stuff. You keep stuff in the cellar, and this stuff gets rotated periodically.
It's almost time for us to wrap it up. I want to know where the name Country Dreams Farm. Now that we've been here for a couple hours and found out your philosophy, I can understand, but how did you know what to call it in the
Well,
beginning?
actually, I didn't know what to call it in the beginning, and I was racking my brains for a long time trying to come up with a name. And I do believe it was my mother that said, well, it's always been your dream to have a farm in the country. And so
Well, that pretty well lays it
there
down.
you go. And so it just kind of stuck, and that was long before the farm needed a name or was doing anything profound at all. But the name just kind of stuck, and I've kept it.
What do your kids think of all this?
That their mother's nuts and eccentric, and
Don't you love it?
they wish.
If my kids said that about me, and they often have, I would be delighted. Those are the highest
Well,
compliments.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Normal people are just no fun at all.
They say to me, "We wish we lived in a normal house, Mom. Why can't we just live with normal people? Like, why isn't everything just normal?" And I guess we all have our different perception about normal. I think this is very normal. I wouldn't have it any other way.
You know what? And I don't mean to interrupt, but when they become parents, they're going to say to their kids, guess what we had in our house when I was a kid?
Absolutely,
And
I tell them.
Maybe they'll become radio or television people, and they'll conjure up all these neat memories, no matter how they live.
Right.
They'll, if they live in a happy house, they'll covet these memories.
Oh, I truly believe it, and I think that eventually they'll see that it wasn't such a crazy lifestyle. But they want everything. They want the Game Boy, and they want and we don't have that kind of stuff. And I don't really feel that bad about it because it's just not necessary. I mean, the only reason we have the internet is because I find the internet very informative when I'm trying to research a piece of equipment or looking to buy a particular part or piece from someone else. It's instant. You get the picture instantly. You get the communication instantly. It's a world of good for research. And obviously we have a telephone so you can reach us, but it wouldn't hurt my feelings if I didn't necessarily, and I tell the kids that all the time, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if we didn't have the phone or the computer or the TV or anything. I'm not, that stuff just doesn't drive me, but my kids think that their mother is absolutely strange and that
I love it.
And then I need to be wearing bell-bottom pants and belly shirts, and they're always telling me I need a makeover, like new hair and.
We'd all like a makeover, but it ain't gonna happen in my lifetime.
It ain't happening in my lifetime either, and that's what I keep telling them. It's not gonna happen in my lifetime. Like I can't have a hairdo where I've got to worry about what it looks like because the horses don't care.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The horses don't care.
They don't care.
As we wrap it up, I'd like to have Calvin turn around this way, and I don't know if he got a picture of
that is an old supposedly
basket.
An old potato basket,
That's
and it is
exactly
so
what it
full
is.
that it is so heavy that I cannot lift that off that hook anymore. That's a blacksmith hook that George made me into the beam, and the basket is so full at this point that would be no point in lifting that off there because
No, I wouldn't want to, but I can see can openers, I can see graters, I can see potato mashers, I can see any number of pieces of equipment with the same color handles that I've handled so many times.
The green and the red are pretty popular, and I have a lot of both colors. I really couldn't decide if I wanted green or red, so we went with both, and that way there, I can, when I go into an antique shop, it doesn't matter if it's green or red, I'll probably own it.
Oh my goodness, and I see in the back, which Calvin probably can't see, is a Cairo syrup can.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, you're talking about memories, Cairo syrup. I think they still make it, I don't know.
Yeah, they do, but not in a can. It's in a glass bottle now, or glass jar.
You got old bottles, you got old dishes, old pans, you got candles, you got neat stuff. It's time for us to wrap this up. But I want to say thank you so much to Melissa Provost, to George, to the horses, to all the other creatures.
Well, I thank you for coming out. I mean, I didn't quite expect you in the house, but
Well, yes,
I suppose this will be kind of interesting.
It's fascinating and wonderful and interesting, and you must keep us informed about everything you've done. So when we come back, we can do a chapter 2. And
There you go. Well, the next time you come back, hopefully we'll be possibly, maybe harvesting corn with a corn binder.
Won't that be fun?
Oh, I think it'll be awesome. Absolutely.
Some of the best programs we've ever done on this series are
Really?
almost like a serial. You know the chapter 1, and you meet people who are so fascinating that you can't shut off the faucet.
There you go, and you go back a year or two later and see the improvements and update people.
This is the kind of program that epitomizes the tenets and theories that Calvin and I have with this program. A program that we can air now, and we can air 20 years from now, and it will have the same meaning for another generation of people all that time in the future.
Yep.
So you've done a good thing here. You are doing a good thing here, and I don't care what your kids think about you.
I don't really care either.
I think you're pretty terrific. Melissa, thank you so much for having us here.
Well, you're quite welcome. I enjoyed having you here.
Best of good fortune with Country Dreams Farm and everything else you do with your life.
Well, thank you very much. It's been fun.
I think somebody up there thought it was a cool thing for you to come up and say, hey, remember that time when you were frozen to death and you stood over your...
At Jack Dragoons. Some of that equipment out there has actually come from Jack's place. I love to go up there. Every once in a while, somebody will trade in an old piece.
He's a good friend, an icon, and a pillar of his community, isn't he? Jack and the whole darn family. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.
New York Lotto jackpot is now $10 million.
Cool.
Tomorrow on Entertainment Tonight, Pierce Brosnan, Vanessa Williams, Kurt Russell, 3 public stars, 3 private loves.
It has heart. It has good soul to it.
Brosnan's back, but forget those Bond girls. Pierce is revealing the true love of his life. Then,
we are behind the scenes on the set of Eraser.
Wild Girl Williams.
Pretty exciting. I know why the guys are into it.
She's getting tough, shooting it up with Arnold and loving every minute.
I did get a lot of comments when I was shooting the gun that I looked pretty good shooting it.
Plus, Kurt Russell and his kid.
He reminds me of me.
He loves Goldie and he loves their son, so he's putting him to work.
I think I'm finding that I'm the world's worst stage father.
That's tomorrow.
Kurt Russell is obviously proud to be working with his son. So when Katie Sagal returned to Married with Children after giving birth to her second child, was she relieved to be reunited with her 2 TV kids? Hey, it's the Bundys. You better believe she was not. Peg Bundy is finally back to Married with Children. Of course, the reason for the 4-month absence was Katie Sagal's pregnancy and the birth of her second child.
His name is Jackson, and he's 5 weeks old. He's great.
She looks great. That's another thing. I mean, I couldn't believe she just had a baby. She looks really good. It's good to have her back.
Welcome back, Katie Sagal as Peggy, everybody.
Katie returned just in time to tape the season finale. Ed O'Neill seemed a little flustered, and a scene where the Bundys renew their vows with Minister Gary Coleman took several takes.
Do you take this woman to be your wife?
For the 7th. For the 37th.
38?
I'm not gonna say it again.
Not say what?
I do.
It's great to be back, though. I love these people. It feels like I never left.
Katie has already brought her 20-month-old daughter, Sarah, to the set, but she says she could not wear her Peg Bundy clothes because she didn't want Sarah to flip out. The Bundys renewed their vows in a May episode of Married with Children on Fox.
Princess Diana will not be renewing her vows anytime soon. Of course, she's getting a royal divorce, but she'll always have those palace memories, and she's keeping them close with her own portrait. We're bringing you all the brushstrokes in today's ET Net. A picture-perfect Princess Di has come to America. Di posed 13 times for this life-size portrait, which goes on display this month in New York City.
Hasn't been seen in London, but gets to be seen in America first.
Veteran Western actor Ben Johnson is dead at the age of 77. A one-time rodeo champion, Johnson won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his performance in The Last Picture Show.
And up here, of course, we have this beautiful alpine lake. Are you listening to anything I have to say?
Sure, he's bold and beautiful on the daytime soap, but E.T. was on hand when Dylan Neal became the bashful star of a Playgirl pictorial.
I don't know how this is going to turn out. I've never done anything like this before.
With the sizzling issue now on the stands, it looks like Dylan did just fine. The latest cover of Vanity Fair features a lot of new faces most of us don't know yet.
This is a remarkable portrait of the people that represent this country in Atlanta this summer.
They're the young hopefuls of the USA Olympic team, captured by famed celebrity photographer Annie Leibovitz. Vanity Fair is on newsstands tomorrow in New York and L.A., then across America next week.
Andre Agassi has served up a few aces as a tennis superstar, but no on-court conquest has equaled his engagement to Brooke Shields. Now he's starting a new career and having a ball thanks to Brooke. He's a hit on the tennis court, but Andre Agassi recently entered a different racket when he was served up a chance to play fashion model for GQ magazine.
I always get nervous when they start looking at the Polaroids and I get a tense look on their face. But GQ wants to put me on the cover or something like this, and I guess it excites me, but I never really stress what I'm really looking like. I don't really take myself that seriously.
Oh, nice, nice.
Agassi scored big points for enthusiasm, but admits he was intimidated by the fact that his fiancée, Brooke Shields, is one of the world's most famous models.
I've seen Brooke do a lot of photo shoots of certain natures, and it's hard to feel like you look good after watching her, so.
Andre says he's ready to make the leap into holy wedlock. He's already got a game plan.
He gets treated with respect and dignity and integrity, and those are the things that I'm really looking forward to, and not to mention kids. I mean, that's like it would be a dream come true to me to have a family.
And he says there will be no competition about who's top dog in their household.
When my career's coming to an end, Brooks will just be getting really in the place that she wants it. So it's like, it's nice, when I stop bringing home the bacon, she can start bringing home the bacon.
Nice concept. No date has been set for Andre and Brooke's marriage match. His issue of GQ will hit newsstands in June.
So maybe WKRP was not exactly IBM, and Melrose Place is not an address in cyberspace. But Lonnie Anderson has become computer literate. It's just the typing that's tough.
The small-town girl from Minnesota goes to computer land. It's amazing.
Lonnie went online.
What was it like being on Melrose Place?
But typing proved tougher than talking to fans.
Oh, I forgot to space. Where are you? I can't find the K. How embarrassing.
After bringing in a wired assistant, Lonnie tackled the more than 1,000 questions that poured in.
Was it hard to write about your life in high heels? Are you a true blonde? Absolutely not. I'm getting comments and questions and some really outrageous stuff that we can't even repeat here on national television. Wow.
And there are a few topics that were taboo.
There were a lot of questions about Bert that I think I've answered in my book already, so anybody who asks those questions can go out and get the book and they'll find the answers.
Lonnie's boyfriend, Jeff Brown, an attorney, sat in during the online session, and even he learned a thing or two about Lonnie.
I used to think she was perfect. Now I realize she can't type. So.
Thanks, honey.
Lonnie's 7-year-old son, Quentin, is the real computer whiz in the family, so when Lonnie needs some help, she knows whom to ask.
She's seen her husband sent to prison. She's faced public humiliation in the media. But through it all, Tammy Faye has found a way to stay happy. And when she was diagnosed with colon cancer, Tammy Faye put a smile on her face and vowed to fight it. ET's Jan Carl has her courageous story.
I'm not afraid to die, and I'm not afraid to live.
Tammy Faye Baker Mesner's ability to bounce back from adversity has once again served her well as she battles to save her health.
I found out about the cancer about 6 weeks ago.
Was there disbelief?
No. I had been bleeding for about a year and hadn't done anything about it because I was embarrassed to go to a male doctor. And if there's one thing I would like to tell people is don't wait.
How much did your faith help you get through all of this?
I can't tell you. I wasn't one bit afraid, and I don't know why, other than the fact that I have a great belief in God.
Tammy has relied heavily on her second husband, Ro Mesner, for support, but she remains a woman with a real sense of self.
What's the true inner self of Tammy Faye?
It's the Tammy Faye without mascara.
This I gotta see.
And I found out she was a tough old broad.
How many hours after surgery did you put the mascara back on?
Oh, honey, it was on during surgery. They didn't make me take it off. I think they knew they couldn't operate it. They made me take it off. I had wonderful doctors. Understanding nurses.
Tammy Faye says she's drawn strength from her own message. In her inspirational tapes, You Can Make It, she repeatedly points to her own success in overcoming great personal obstacles and disappointments.
I think when someone's been there and made it, it really helps when they look you in the face and say, you're going to make it. It's going to be okay.
Tammy Faye's You Can Make It motivational system is on sale now, and her personal fight is not yet over. Although doctors think they got all the cancer during surgery, she still has radiation and chemotherapy treatments to undergo. But she says she'll be all right. She is a real inspiration. Julie and John.
I'm glad she's feeling better, too. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, Jan. You've won 2 Oscars now. What do? If you're Mel Gibson, you get Ransomed. More from the set of Ransom, plus practical jokes with Mel, Ron, and Renee ahead on ET.
What publisher started his career as a cartoonist, then put Marilyn Monroe in the first issue of his magazine? The answer's next in today's ET Birthdays.
You've always made a great team. Together growing, dreaming, caring, and sharing the rewards along the way. Park Avenue. For the comfort, for the luxury, for the quality. Congratulations, you've earned it. Buick Park Avenue.
Dodge Dakota is #1 in resale versus Ford, Chevy, and GMC. #1 in horsepower, #1 in torque, even #1 in towing. In fact, Dodge Dakota is ranked #1 in more categories versus any compact. So it should come as no surprise that across America, Dodge pickups are #1 in sales growth. Now get up to $3,500 off on Dodge Dakota, including $1,000 cash back.
From Walt Disney Pictures comes the ultimate thrill ride.
Fasten your seatbelt.
Critics agree James and the Giant Peach is a creative masterpiece.
Oh, yeah?
That's pure magic.
Ah!
It's brilliant, breathtaking, an instant Disney classic.
Have you lost your mind?
A spellbinding movie miracle that will blow you away. James and the Giant Peach. Rated PG. Starts Friday, April 12th at a theater near you.
Where do you turn to find help for an elderly person you love? Call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1116.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. Indeed, your eyes are as good as mine, Watson. You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. Being visually impaired doesn't impair my performance. Find out how little it takes to employ people with disabilities. Call the President's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities. 800-ADA-WORK.
Celebrating an ET birthday today, former Cosby kid Keisha Knight Pulliam is 17. Soap actor Austin Peck turns 25. Model Paulina Poroskova is 31.
Dennis